Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our event this morning. My name is Sean Welsh. I have the honor of chairing the Right Place Board for this coming year. And I think it goes without saying, if we look back to, I believe, March 14th, the day that we were looking forward and wondering what things were going to be like and wondering how we were going to function in this world from work from home, we've accomplished a lot. We've done a lot. And here at the Right Place, we've done a lot also. We've tried to continue to bring resources, bring thought knowledge, and bringing ideas to you to help your businesses be more successful and to help you grow and prosper in our region, because that's what we're all about, is to try to make our region better every day. One of the things we did do during this pandemic when we've all been home is we went out and we hired a new CEO. After the amazing accomplishments of our prior CEO, Birgit Close, we were fortunate enough to bring on board someone who knows West Michigan very well, someone who's worked within our community, but someone who left and worked and gathered new ideas, working in Omaha and working in Denver, leading economic development there. And they're coming back home and they're now joined us. So I have the honor of introducing our new executive director and president of the Right Place, Randy Thalen. Randy, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Sean, and good morning, everybody. And it's great to be here. And boy, we wanted to be in person this morning, but we just couldn't quite pull that off given the short window we had and with all the changes we've had with return to office and changing environment from a regulatory standpoint. But certainly we look forward to being with everybody this fall as we hold our next investor forum in September. So watch for that and hopefully we'll see you there. But in the meantime, we continue to make the Zoom environment work as best we can and in a lot of ways use it to our advantage. I told people a number of times, I think launching in a Zoom or a virtual environment probably wasn't ideal, but at the end of the day, I have been able to meet more people more quickly than I could have if I were driving between appointments. And so in that regard, it's been able to help sort of cast a wider net and reach a wider array of stakeholders over the last, not quite 100 days. I think we're about 97 now, so we're getting there. But it's been a lot of fun. It's been really great to get back in the region and re-engage and everything sort of that I knew when I left has been sort of reinforced upon coming back. Just this incredible public-private partnership mindset here, the culture, this can-do culture that wants to get things done, all sort of working in our favor. And as we look about the economy right now, we get back to our offices and we get back to sort of a new normal. It's really exciting to see how we've performed across this past year and how we are ahead of the pack in many ways. So looking forward to our conversation here with you today. Sort of two primary elements to the program. First, this is our investor update, and it's certainly appropriate for us to share kind of what we've been up to since we last talked in March. So I'll share some comments here in a moment. And then we're going to have a conversation around returning to office. And I think we would all agree this is accelerated, in some regards, accelerated more slowly than we would have thought. I think we all last March 14th thought maybe it wouldn't last as long as it did. And then as we got into it, I know from some of the surveys we conducted, we anticipated it extending a little bit longer. And so when we all pivoted in May with some decisions on masking and ability to return to office, this conversation has accelerated. Our rollback or our roll and return to the office has come forward maybe faster than some of our plans anticipated. So I think our conversation today with a variety of business leaders from a variety of business types is going to, I think, be a compelling and interesting conversation for all of us to engage. So be ready with your questions and comments as we proceed through the program. But first, again, investor seminar here, investor forum here does call for an update on what we've been doing with your dollars that you support us with. And certainly since the first of the year, and I would say since the 1st of March when I came on board, it has been full speed ahead for all of us. We've got an exceptional team here at the Right Place and an exceptional group of stakeholders beyond the walls of our offices. And everybody's pulling together to try to advance some high-level goals of growing this market. And we're off to a great start. It's important, I think, to note, if you think about how Michigan and even West Michigan throughout history with recessions, how we've performed, typically Michigan goes deeper into a recession and takes longer to come out. It's the nature of some of the industries that we have in this state. But this time, it's way different. That the challenges of the economy are way different. The performance of the economy is different. And what we're seeing out of this to date is outperformance by Michigan, and especially here in West Michigan. Our unemployment rates far outpace, on the positive side, far outpace what we see across the country and And so that's a pretty unusual position for us to be in coming out of a recession. So we've got to continue to build on that momentum. We got to continue to push ahead and take advantage of this unique dynamic that right now is favoring us. So since the start of the year, part of my push at the right place, I know Birgit had this as well, is we have to constantly meet and engage with our stakeholders and engage with our business community, understand what their needs are, and be rapidly responsive to those so we capture as much of the growth potential as possible. Since the start of the year, we've gone on we've gone on exactly 167 business retention calls with area employers. And from that, we've learned 133 of them are reporting growing sales. So 133 of 167 growing sales, only 2 report declining sales. The rest are stable. So when you think about what that means for your business, whether you're a lender, an architect, a builder, you name it, there's growth opportunities all around. And within those, growing sales companies, 105 are forecasting either adding people, adding investment, or both. And so the expansion opportunities for our companies off of those growing sales is pretty remarkable. And so for us, as we lean into that and recognize this is a unique inflection point opportunity for us, we're doubling down on our outreach to companies. And it's an opportunity, I think, for the folks on this call to help. In the month of June, so a weekend, in the month of June, the team here at the Right Place is conducting 100 business retention calls. Everybody on staff from top to bottom is making a retention call to help advance that goal towards 100. We have about 94 scheduled right now, so a few more to go, and we'll be at that goal. Our board meets, Sean's the board chair, our board meets on Thursday. I assure you by Thursday, we'll have 100 retention visits scheduled. But it's our way to blanket the market and deepen our understanding of what's taking place and how we can be helpful. And organizationally, getting everybody to participate in that program and getting in front of our clients is just going to help us be more empathetic, more understanding, and ultimately more responsive to the needs of the community. So it's a big initiative for us. And you can help if you're growing, frankly, as a company, and you want to have that conversation with us. Reach out to me, reach out to the team. We'd be happy to meet and understand what your growth opportunity is and how we can be helpful. Another way we could partner is if your client or your customer or your supplier has a growth opportunity, your neighbor, your colleague, your friend, whomever you know that is in an expansion mode, bring them to our attention. We can go on those retention visits with you. We can do it in tandem. We can sort of supplement and support your pitch to your client, if you will, and do that together. It's a great way for us to partner. It's a great way for us to find growth opportunities together and support our mutual shared benefits, shared goals. So reach out to us and let us know if you're growing directly or if you've got someone within your network that you know is on that expansion path. We need to be capturing as much of this growth as we can in this moment. And so we need our entire network to be working in that regard. So getting out in front of clients is a high priority, and we're aggressively doing so through June, and we'll obviously carry that forward through the balance of the year. Just last night, our marketing team pressed go on our new website. So we've revamped our website. But most importantly, within that, obviously with a new website, you get a better, cleaner communication style. But what I'm most excited about within that website is a new diverse business directory. Last year we went through an exhaustive analysis with the Brookings Institution around our D&I efforts and the need, frankly, to do more across the region. One of the findings in that report was our overall underperformance from a minority-owned business position. And so part of that is getting the message out. I've talked with a number of companies in the first 3 months here who are actively trying to find ways to diversify their supply chain, diversify their spend across the community. And there's a bit of a disconnect in terms of how you go about finding those entrepreneurs and those businesses. And so we've taken away some of that disconnect. You can go find that on our website now. I'm sure somebody on our team can put that link in the chat for everybody to chase down. We've got 1,200 businesses that our Black community, our Hispanic community, our LGBTQ, our women-owned businesses. You can find them there and sort through them as you see fit. But certainly there's plenty of opportunity for you to now diversify your spend across the region and help grow and address one of the shortcomings in our market. The third piece I'd share is just a move towards technology. We talked before, if you were on our investor call back in March, you know full well we're committed 100% to our manufacturing community. We know that is the foundation of our economy, and it's a core strength. We truly have a center global of excellence in that regard. Our trick then going forward is how do we maintain and solidify that manufacturing base and continue to diversify the economy. And one piece that we intend to do so is on the technology side, is how do we bring more tech companies, more tech hiring into the market to help grow our economy, and frankly, in many ways, connect to that manufacturing base or connect to the health sciences base that we have here. Tech has a way of cutting across all industries, and so we want to bring that, grow that expertise here in this market. So we're launching over the course of the next several months. Now that we can bring people together, we'll be launching sort of a tech strategy effort, bringing in thought leaders from across the community, big and small employers. I mean, everybody has tech hiring needs pretty much at this stage, whether it's Spectrum and 1,000 IT and cybersecurity types, or Josh is on our team or today, our panel with Michigan Software Labs, and they're moved into new space and are growing aggressively. So we have hiring needs on the tech side. We want to better understand that need and that opportunity. We want to better understand our talent pipeline. So bringing in educators to weigh in on that conversation, and ultimately create a strategy together that will help us go after and grow that tech sector. One example of how you can work with us in that regard is on the tech attraction side. And I think sometimes we get hung up in economic development looking for that mega project, that Amazon HQ2, or if you've seen the headlines lately, Apple is moving into Raleigh. Oracle announced a major project, 8,000 jobs in Nashville, Tennessee. At this stage, those are not on the horizon for us in West Michigan. We're not of that scale. We're not of that size to attract projects like that. But where we can be successful, and I'm convinced we will be, is sort of this organic tech growth. What I saw, and Sean referenced my time in Denver, what I saw firsthand there was companies that would start with a single hire. They would find one person in Denver that they wanted to hire. They would empower that team to hire a handful of people around them. And as soon as they got to 5 or 6 people, they would find themselves, Google or Facebook or whomever would say, let's move out of your home and let's get into a WeWork kind of a location, a co-working kind of office, and allow a bit of an office culture, a company culture to take root. Once they got to that co-working space, suddenly they'd find themselves growing. And by the time they got to 25 or 30 people, the company would say, all right, now it's getting a little bit expensive to be in a WeWork. Let's find our own office floor somewhere. And then they'd go from 30 to 100. And over time, they might get to 200 and put their name on a building. But that whole process starts with one employee somewhere in the market that decided they wanted to help grow that footprint in Denver. And going forward, obviously here in Grand Rapids, we're looking for those opportunities. So we already have found, we know somebody who works for Google here that's got a position that looks to be pretty strong. We're reaching out and finding ways to begin that type of conversation. And so I'd encourage all of you to think within your network, who do you know that might be working remotely here for one of the major or smaller tech firms for that matter, that we can begin to have that conversation around, if that person has a heart for West Michigan and wants to find ways to grow the tech community here, they have an inroad that can be quite successful. And there's models all around the country where they've been able to take that one hire from that one tech company and really grow it into a sizable presence in the market. And I would just share, I had a wonderful conversation with Hank Meyer the other day, and I was telling him this story, and he brought forward that he's been running into somebody that's commuting from Grand Rapids to Austin, and he runs into them on occasion at a Starbucks store. And so I said, well, Hank, I'm sending you some business cards, and you need to pass along my name the next time you see him at Starbucks, because we need to have those types of conversations bubbling up. So if you know of somebody in your network, if you know of somebody that's actively engaged in that tech space, by all means, send them our way so we can continue to have that conversation and invite them to help us grow here in West Michigan. So it's been, all in all, an exceptional first 3 months. I've enjoyed just about every minute of it. The allergies this spring have been pretty tough, but otherwise it's been a really fun transition and really has aligned with my expectations. I knew I had a strong team here at the right place. I knew we had a great culture in West Michigan that was pulling together and wanted to grow. And I'm excited to be a part of it. I'm certainly excited to continue pushing forward in the months and years to come. So that's kind of the update. I'd be happy to take any questions, but I know today our schedule is pretty tight. So if you have questions or comments, I'd love to connect, grab a cup of coffee, grab lunch, grab a beer, you name it. I'm happy to meet in person, or we can continue to meet in Zoom, but reach out. I'd love to continue to build my connections and relationships throughout the region in the weeks to come. But with that, we want to have a healthy conversation around return to office. When we first put this topic together, this was before the CDC said we could unmask, and it was before the state of Michigan said we could return to the office. And so lots has changed since we first sent out this invite. And I think now the timing is actually even better, so that we're all sort of sort of muddling through this return to office, and we've maybe tried to hit go on some of our plans that have been in place for a while. And so we want to get a variety of perspectives today from our panelists and get an understanding of, from a different business types, how are they responding, how are they reacting, so it can inform you and your work with your company. But we also want to hear from a broader audience and get some input from you as well. So we expect this to be a two-way conversation. To kick it off, Brad Thomas, who's the president and CEO of Progressive AE, and his partner there, Melissa Malberger, are going to kind of give us a high-level overview of what they see taking place across the market, both here in the region and around the country. So, Brad and Melissa, if you don't mind, I'll hand it over to you.
Good morning, Randy. Thank you. I guess I would start by sharing. I think you got the name of the topic right. That is return to the office. I can tell you a number of times within our four walls, I would hear people refer to it as return to work. And I would often remind them, no, they're still working. They're just doing it somewhere else. And they are still on payroll. So I certainly hope they are. And of course, in return, on occasion, they would remind me, as we were talking about our return to office strategy, that work is what we do. It's not necessarily where we go. But good morning, everybody. I'm Brad Thomas with Progressive AE. I'm very happy to be here this morning. When Randy shared the topic with me and asked if I would speak, he asked me to talk about two things. One is to share a little bit about where we are as a company, as a West Michigan employer in our journey, and then at the same time share some insights from what we're seeing and hearing from our clients. So we're going to do that. I'm going to tell a little bit of the sort of the tale of where we've been. I need to give you a little bit of context to understand our firm and what's transpired over the last 15 months to do that. And then my colleague Melissa Malberg, who leads our workplace strategy group, is going to share some insights in terms of what we're seeing and hearing from our clients. So a little bit about Progressive. Progressive Architecture and Engineering, full service commercial and institutional design firm. We are, I guess, from a classification standpoint, probably about 90 to 95% professional office in terms of our personnel, represented largely by architects, interior designers, mechanical, electrical, structural, civil engineers, urban planners, and then the corresponding support staff. We have about 250 employees. 200 of those are here in West Michigan, the other 50 in Charlotte, North Carolina. We have architects and engineers licensed and practicing in all continental 48 states. And in any given year, probably active projects in 35 states. Pre-COVID, you would probably describe our firm as a typical office. As we hired new employees, every employee would be assigned a desk, phone and direct dial, fairly flexible office hours, but regular hours that were generally from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And of course, then along came COVID, and things changed very quickly. I don't need to tell you, I know all of you experienced it at the same time. Over the course of 2 weeks last March, we moved from what were initially disruptions in school closings and issues with childcare to within 2 weeks, 100% working remotely. I remember the time clearly. At the onset, my greatest concern was technology. Our systems were never designed for 100% of our staff working remotely. It was perhaps 25% while folks were traveling or working on premise at clients' offices, but never 100%. So that was concerning. However, to my surprise, within about 2 weeks' time, our technology team had overcome the challenge, and surprisingly, things began to work quite effectively. The next big challenge we had was lumpiness, I guess is what I would call it, with respect to our workload. We serve multiple client market sectors. Some of those market sectors literally closed or slowed down to a trickle overnight. Healthcare would be a great example. Our number of our healthcare projects were very quickly put on hold. Our clients said, we don't have time to meet with architects and engineers. We need all hands on deck. Some of our workplace projects, very similar situations. Our clients would be looking across a sea of vacant desks and say, really, we're going to put things on hold until we have a better lens to what the future holds. But our good fortune was on the other side of the coin. Some of the other market sectors we serve were, in fact, picking up. We do a lot of work in industrial and manufacturing. They remain strong. Supply chain, we do a fair amount of work in warehousing, distribution, a lot of cold storage. We have a very large e-commerce and logistics client that frankly we're doubling down. And then our multifamily residential work was what remained strong throughout. But the challenge we had was needing to offset the areas of work that slowed down with those areas that were busy. And this really interesting thing happened about 60 days in. As we were doing our workforce planning, up until COVID, we generally were organized as a company around 2 offices, as I mentioned earlier, one in Grand Rapids and one in Charlotte, North Carolina. And generally, the structure and workforce planning happened, 5 teams in Grand Rapids, 2 in Charlotte. And what happened overnight was we moved from 2 offices to 250 offices of 1. And all of a sudden, as we're looking to redeploy some of the idled capacity, we're recognizing that we can do this very effectively when we remove geography as a constraint. And very quickly, within, I'd say 90 days, we had more or less offset more than 80% of that capacity that emerged at the onset. And about 6 months in, we're really recognizing, boy, this is working quite well. In fact, it became a point where we said, long term, we see this mixed presence not going away. That genie's not going back in the bottle. Remote work is likely going to be here to stay in some fashion. And we decided we were going to embrace it. And we saw it as a new talent strategy. When we we're just coming up on a 60-year-old company. We've been in North Carolina for about 6 years. When we opened that office there, it was in part to access that marketplace, but at the same time, it was a recognition that it was an opportunity for a talent pipeline. We said at the time, sort of tongue in cheek, what we'll do is we'll hire them into the Charlotte office and then we'll promote them to Grand Rapids. Of course, now we're beginning to think about the longer term strategy and the opportunity that this could represent. And we, in fact, launched a reorganization of the firm to really take geography out of our structure. And now we're organized around market sectors, and we're fielding teams of the best talent, regardless of where they're located. And that new org structure went live on January 1 of 2021. Now, I tell you all that only because as we talk about return to office, it's not as simple as going back to where we were and what we were doing back in March of 2020. And so as we talk about our approach, it's colored by both this new, what I'll call emergent talent strategy and the reorganization. So let me shift a little bit to our journey of return to office. I shared some of the things that we found worked well. I would tell you there's some other things that we found challenging in the remote work. One of the most obvious areas is the work that we do is highly creative. It requires a deep integration and collaboration. And I would tell you that was very challenging. It took great effort in order for us to do that well. And most would argue that we didn't do it as well as we can when we work together in physical presence. Another area was this idea of mentorship, internship, or apprenticeship. While we can do a lot in terms of one-on-one meetings and trainings, there's really something lost in that sort of knowledge that a young professional gains through what I'll call osmosis. Overhearing the seasoned project manager resolving issues with technical personnel or clients or contractors related to field issues. And so the loss of being in person compromised, we think, some of the longer term development and growth of some of the younger staff. And of course, the culture. We hired over 40 new employees in the last 14 months. Those employees have never experienced what it means to work at Progressive and sort of the culture of Progressive, the serendipitous run into, oh, by the way, the conversations in the hallway, the relationships that get built to sort of help you through troubled times. And so while there were pluses, we also saw some of the losses, and it really led us, as we began to talk about what does next look like, to try to capture the best of both. And what I know all of you have heard is sort of this hybrid model. The idea, that there are some things that we do best together, and how do we leverage the workspace to do that, while at the same time acknowledging that there are some things that in fact we can do quite well individually. In our technical work, when it gets into detailing or writing specifications, in some cases people can better focus and be more productive when they're not in the office. One of the things we did to start this off, though, when you think about where we came from and how quickly it changed, we really moved into this idea of needing to manage remote workforce out of necessity. Everybody was sent home and we needed to improvise, and we did. But as we looked at moving forward and we were thinking about long-term hybrid and what does remote work mean, we recognized that we needed to invest in some competency development around what does it mean to manage people who aren't necessarily here in front of us. And so our HR leader said, yes, but you know what, that's not new. A lot of national firms have been doing that for a long time, if not global firms. They're not only managing people in multiple locations, they're doing it in multiple time zones. And so there were some core competencies that if we developed those, we were confident that we could overcome that. And so we started with a 2-day offsite back in March. And we pulled together all of our managers, 35 managers, in order to do two things. One was some initial training and competency development. And the second part of it was really about alignment. We wanted to make sure that we were clear in terms of why we were embracing this hybrid model, what we hoped to accomplish out of it, what the strengths were. And we wanted to make sure that there was clarity of message to the staff when they were talking about why. Because clearly, as you'll likely hear, there's really two ends of a spectrum in terms of where people stand in terms of everybody get back to the office as quickly as you can versus I really want to try to protect my, I don't want to say my freedom, my flexibility. And so really it was a combination of educate and align. Ultimately, what we knew we had to do is we had to have a core philosophy that would ground our thinking related to the return to office. It started for us, it was pretty straightforward in the sense that we have a core belief that space matters. It is what we do. We believe that spaces are strategic contributors, not static places. So what our challenge was to understand was how would space strategically contribute to the outcomes of our organization. We knew it was really important that we had to focus on the work, recognizing that some work can be done effectively remotely, but then there were reasons that people come together. Some of the work is better when we're together, and so making certain that it was more about the work. As I said earlier, work is what we do. It's not necessarily where we go. We ultimately landed on this idea of office as primary with enhanced flexibility. And there are a lot of conversation around the enhanced flexibility. With that flexibility we shared comes responsibility and accountability. Accountable to one another in terms of commitments that we make, accountable to our deadlines and to our clients. And to the extent that people manage that well, then it's not as concerning to us about where that work happens. But it really led to a lot of conversations about the we before me. We've recognized over the past 15 months through somewhat forced isolation, people got a little bit narrow in terms of their thinking and what they needed to do to get their job done. And we need to reground them in sort of the organization and this collective good versus individual concerns or issues. So it's a journey. We're still underway now. We're in the process right now of sort of resetting the deck, aligning what the space will look like to support the new organization structure. Our expectation is that by July 1, we're going to be ready to begin to, July 5, we'll be ready to begin to move people back into the office. It'll be done in phases. By August 1, we should be in our new future state and learning and then adjusting as time requires. I'll pause there. There's a lot more detail I could share, but I want to make sure that I provide a time for Melissa Malberg, my colleague, as I shared earlier, who leads our workplace strategy group, to share a little bit about what we're hearing from our clients. So with that, Melissa.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Good to be here with you virtually. So as Brad mentioned, my focus is on workplace strategy, engaging with our clients and stakeholders to understand what their desired future state is and to discover together how a work environment can be designed as a strategic contributor to that future, enabling organizational success. Progressive is also part of a global design consortium of firms with locations throughout Europe, Asia, and the Americas, and I co-lead a workplace strategy team with representatives from each organization. As you can imagine, our focus has shifted over the last year to deep dive into the effects of the pandemic and impacts we're seeing universally around the world, as well as what seems to vary by region, client size, focus, et cetera. And to say it's been a disruptive year seems a little silly, a little bit of an understatement. And you all know why. We won't go into the reasons, right? As we've all lived it. But as we look towards finally a future where we can maybe plan beyond the pandemic, it's left a lot of people wondering, so what now? How do we plan for this? And how do we go? Where do we go from here? The simple answer is there's really no going back to our pre-pandemic days without acknowledging how much we've all learned, grown, and changed in the face of such adversity.
Melissa,
Much
you're
of-
not sharing right now.
Oh, sorry about that. Let me try again. Can you see it this time, Brad?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Sorry about that. So there's no going back to our pre-pandemic days. And I think as we've looked at trends and understood what's going on in the marketplace, both globally and locally, really what we've seen is a lot of what's emerged isn't necessarily new, but it's accelerated and pulled to the forefront of our attention due to the extreme circumstances many of us have lived through. One of the main things, obviously, that we're seeing is a renewed focus on health and well-being. Sanitation and disinfectant have had their due focus through the height of the pandemic, and we've also understood the opportunity to really double down on long-term sustainable interventions to our spaces to support the health and well-being of people in our built environments. Air quality, ventilation, natural light, movement, nutrition, lots of opportunities have been studied over the years and are available to really enhance the quality of life and lead to happier, healthier, and more productive employees. We also see a renewed focus on equitable experiences, whether we're talking about protocols, benefits, amenities, or quality connections in a mixed presence reality, like Brad was mentioning. We've come to better understand the mental and emotional toll that inequitable experiences have on our ability to productively contribute to the success of our organizations. We know it can't be a one-size-fits-all solution from organization to organization, and even within one organization, your sales and design and manufacturing teams each have different needs and requirements for success in their diverse roles. As we've learned to work through the pandemic and look to our work after, our focus remains on how to maximize the experience and needs of each of these groups, rather than reducing everyone down to the least common denominator. Technology, seamless and intuitive technology, as Brad mentioned, has been a key focus for us and for most all of our clients. We've had the impacts of mobile technology on our work processes for years, and many global and distributed organizations had invested in technology that supports quality connections between distributed team members. And as we talked about, with very little notice, the rest of us had to catch up to systems, processes, software, and virtual interactions that allowed a majority of professionals to maintain a surprising amount of business continuity in a fully remote and distributed environment. And this isn't really going to go away as people look to return to the office. There will be still an expectation and a need for a heightened sense of connectivity as we move forward. And lastly, activity-based working. It's a long-standing workplace strategy that simply refers to the ability to choose where and how to work based on the task at hand and the level of interaction needed, instead of relying predominantly on a single desk to support all of the work that a professional might need to accomplish at any given time. Many of you have incorporated spaces into your work environments pre-pandemic that support this flexible way of working, from cafes to focus rooms to open collaboration spaces, a diversity of formal meeting rooms. Post-pandemic, we anticipate desires for this flexibility only increasing exponentially. And all of this leads to one of the greatest paradoxes to emerge from this experience. After over a year of working predominantly from home offices and dining room tables, where we simultaneously experience the enhanced flexibility of a more integrated life, as well as one isolated from our work environments, our coworkers, and our customers or clients, we've gained a greater awareness of where and how we can best accomplish our work. And as we emerge, we see two seemingly contrasting preferences from a large majority of professionals regardless of industry or role. The first is a strength and desire to have flexibility and autonomy over where and how we work, while at the same time, an equally strong desire for more in-person interactions, connections, and relationships with colleagues. People are built for connections, and we've really missed out on those over the last year. And so in short, people want it both ways, the best of both worlds. So what does this mean? When we strip away the individual details and nuance, three main strategies exist with implications on talent in real estate. All in office and all remote are the extremes, each with their own set of impacts on policy, equipment, technology, and process. And covering the spectrum between these two is hybrid working. And it really just refers to a myriad of arrangements in which employees sometimes work at the office and sometimes work elsewhere, depending on the work that's being done and the level of interaction that's needed. Once we realized that many of us really could perform our work from home, we also started to see other benefits emerge, but it wasn't all rosy. Whether distractions from roommates, kids at home, household chores, or lack of adequate space to work, many also experienced the downsides to working strictly from home. And while tasks could be performed virtually, some, such as mentoring, building trust, co-creating, and onboarding, realized true benefits from in-person interaction. So we began to lament what was lost when we were forced to leave the office. Tactical needs such as better bandwidth and access to resources, but also space to focus in connections, culture, and community. And of course, there's the opportunity in third places, co-working and flexible real estate that can benefit some organizations and individuals. So how do we proceed? We know it's not a one size fits all, so our response to these influences can't start with workspace solutions. Don't get me wrong, I'm a firm believer in the power of space to shape and enhance our experiences. The key first, though, is to focus on clearly centering your business strategy and people strategy, and then understanding how the space can be used to really enhance and support those. Why are you in business? What value do you bring to your clients, customers, and members? How do you win in the marketplace? And then what talent is critical in achieving this success? What do these individuals need in order to be engaged, fulfilled, and productive in their work? In our current reality, what is your employee value proposition to attract that talent? It's on understanding these items that we can then base our designs for the work environment and truly realize the benefit of space as a strategic contributor to organizational success. And that really is, I think, the key to what we look at as the future of work for many organizations. So I'm looking forward to you being able to experience the panel discussion. And as we transition to that time, I just want to leave you with one key question. As we continue to re-engage shared spaces and return to the office, how might we use the work environment to enhance our work experiences and work processes in ways that can't be achieved virtually and remotely? Thanks, everybody.
Well, thank you, Melissa. That was terrific. Brad as well. Really helps sort of set the table for our panel conversation, and really, as we all go through this transition from working from home to returning to the office, I think it's a well-timed discussion, and I think Brad and Melissa, I think you framed that out well. Before, and at this point, I'd ask our panelists to open up their video and unmute yourself. But at the same time, Jill, we'd like to now do just a quick survey, do a quick poll of our audience today, just get a sense of where you're at in your return to office strategy. So you'll see that pop up here in a minute. So Jill, I'll give you, there we go. So if everybody could take a second to go through this, that would be great. It should just be 3 or 4 questions there, so it should just take a minute. And while you do that, of course, during the midst of this panel conversation, please just enter your questions into the Q&A tool at the bottom of the screen. We want to get your questions, and if you have thoughts or comments along the way, feel free to put them in the chat as well. And we'll do our best to make this a two-way virtual conversation. Okay, well, again, thanks, Melissa. Thanks, Brad, for teeing us up. And if we'll go through real quickly some really quick introductions of our panel. We've got Sarah Hudson, who joins us from Lighthouse. Sarah is the VP of Operations. Lighthouse Group is a strong employer in the region in the insurance space. You may have seen in our marketing, Harold Burrell on their team was going to join us. If you know Harold, please reach out to him and just give him your thoughts and prayers. He's got a family health issue that they're wrestling with down south, and so he had to take a flight out last night. And so we wish him and his family the best. But Sarah, thank you for stepping in and being with us this morning. Josh Hulst is the co-founder and managing partner of Michigan Software Labs. And Josh, I'm sure, will share his story of opening up an office, a new office in the midst of a global pandemic. So interesting stories to come there. Beth O'Shaughnessy, Senior Vice President, Chief Administrative Officer, General Counsel, and Secretary at Steelcase, and I think probably 10 other hats there as well. So Beth, I think, not only representing a major employer, but also deeply embedded in the office environment and how that impacts our productivity and our well-being and our companies and how we can perform. Brad is going to join us as well and share his thoughts and views. So I think I've got everybody there. Perfect. Well, I guess, Beth, I'll turn it to you first. Steelcase is a strong employer throughout the region. You've got an interesting blend there of manufacturing employees who've been there throughout. And so, I always, remind folks that we think about return to office. There's been a number of people that have been there from day one, never really stopping for any extended period of time. So we've got to be mindful that it's not everybody returning to the office. There's a number of people that have, whether they've been making parts or clearing tables or working in our hotels or you name it. So it's a pretty interesting time. And I think for Steelcase in particular, having blended office and manufacturing, I'd be curious to get your perspective on kind of where you've been and where you're going in the months ahead.
Great. Thanks, Randy. And good morning to everyone. I'm thrilled to be here today. And if you'll let me back up a little bit, I want to get slightly academic, and that's because for Steelcase, many of you think of us as an office furniture manufacturer, but we're really, first and foremost, a research institution. We study work, workers, and the workplace, and how each of those three change over time. So at this point, beginning with today, we are primarily back in the office in the Grand Rapids campus, but we have 47 locations around the world. And all of those are under different guidelines and different rules. And so we're in various stages of being primarily back in the office. And I love, Brad, that you use the term primarily back in the office, because that's our term as well. So let me just back up for a second, though, because since the early days of the pandemic, everything has changed. How we work, how we live, how we learn. And amidst this sea of speculation, we decided to launch essentially a 15-month research project. So we began in March of 2020, and we conducted 8 primary studies. We interviewed 32,000 people around the globe in 10 different countries, and we analyzed 8,000 customer floor plates, if you will. The studies were everything from work from home studies to return to the office studies, work experience diagnostic studies, which really is a blending of space, culture, tools, and processes, global customer roundtables, space scan analyses, and then a partnership with a professor at MIT who focuses on the fluid dynamics of disease transmission through exhalation, talking, and coughing. And then also partnered with her as well on surface materials and their ability to mitigate disease. So based on all that research, we learned a lot. And I would perhaps suggest that we're not saying, we don't believe the question is about going back to the office. We believe, due to all the changes to the work and the workers and the workplaces, the question really is, how do you go back to better than we had before? And so the question obviously is, what does better mean? And what we believe is it means that the workplace has to be safe and it has to be compelling. So I want you to just imagine for a moment that the different experiences that all of us have had over the last 16 months. We learned that there are really 5 personas that we believe existed. So the first persona is the isolated Zoomer. And for the isolated Zoomer, he believes that the home office is a lonely cage and can't wait to get out. The second persona is the autonomy seeker. And for her, the home office is freedom, finally. Third persona is the frustrated creative worker. He or she views the home office as a suspension of life and normalcy. The fourth persona is the overworked caretaker. For this person, the home office is a nonstop flow of competing demands and drudgery. And then lastly, the fifth persona is a relieved self-preservationist. And for this person, the home office is the only place they feel safe because they have been forever changed by this pandemic. So hopefully you recognize yourself, maybe you recognize your colleagues or the people that report to you or your upline. But generally speaking, Brad and Melissa covered this already. There were good things about working from home. People didn't have to commute. The ability to focus for some was better, not for all. Lack of distractions for some was better, but not for all. And having a range of settings, if you're fortunate enough to have a nice home, was probably better. But then there were many things people didn't like. Feeling isolated, becoming gradually less productive. Our studies show that people felt by the end of the pandemic that they were 14% less engaged with the culture of their company and with their colleagues, and they were 12% less productive than they were before the pandemic. So it's clear that going back to better, because of all the different reactions that everybody had to the last 16 months, is really about the hybrid future that Brad and Melissa spoke of. So our research shows that only 23% of employees want to go back to the office full-time. 72% want a hybrid solution, with the majority of them wanting to be in the office 4 days a week and at home 1 day a week. And only 5% want full-time work from home. So how do you build that hybrid in order to make it a compelling experience for people to come back? There's 5 things that people need. They need to feel safe. And safety has changed. It's no longer about fire suppression and security. It now has an additional layer of everything from air quality to safety protocols, cleanliness, physical distancing, density, and visitor protocols and food and beverage protocols. The second need is a need for belonging. Belonging really is a balance between community, feeling connected to the organization, but also feeling a sense of purpose, resiliency, trust, and inclusivity. The third thing people need is a productive way to balance focus work and collaborative work. And both show up as the main reasons that people want to get back to the office. The fourth need is a need for comfort. And by comfort, we mean physical comfort, cognitive comfort, and emotional comfort. With physical comfort, people now want more of a range of postures and settings. They want to be able to move fluidly through the workplace, stand up at times, walk on a treadmill while working at times, lounge in comfortable furnitures, and also sit in task seating. So that range of postures yields more physical comfort. They want distraction from, distraction-free environments, for their cognitive comfort. And they want the ability to connect quickly with people that help them brainstorm and help them serendipitously think of new ideas for their cognitive comfort. And then they want to reconnect emotionally, for emotional comfort, to their organization's shared purpose. And we're really seeing employees speak about needing to have a greater connection to their company's purpose than ever before. And if they can't find it, they'll leave and they'll find a new job. So the last need is a need for control. And I think, Melissa, you might have mentioned it as flexibility. What we're seeing is that people want more control over where they work whenever they need and depending on the demand. So we have a principle that we've had for years called choice and control. And we work with leaders to make sure that their people know that they are the best to decide where they do their best work based on their project. So activity-based planning perhaps, but maybe it's staying home in the morning if you want complete heads down work to do some writing, and then coming in the afternoon because you need to collaborate with your colleagues. So it's this ability to be in control and to be trusted to make the best decisions. So when you wrap that all together, knowing the differences in everybody and what seems to be important now based on these studies and coming back to the office, we know that returning to better must equally support teamwork and individual work. Returning to better must allow for quick shifts between the different kinds of work by embedding your facility with different spaces to do the work. Returning to better must balance personal, collaborative learning and also social spaces. And it must provide a range of privacy and control options. All of that together creates a more compelling workplace and a better workplace than we left in March of 2020. So
That's terrific. And sometimes we probably take the furniture industry for granted. And I think in moments like this, when we get the depth of knowledge and research from Beth and our team at Steelcase, it reinforces how fortunate we are here to have that kind of experience. I can tell you, when I started March 1st, we opened up the office slightly. We invited 5 people to come back, and we grew it to 8 and kind of stabilized there for a while. We opened May 24th is when we were allowed to, and so we've invited people back, or we welcomed them back without a strict mandate just yet. But people have come back, and the personas you described were very much on cue or on point. I think I've probably identified all of them. Don't know that I've seen the lonely, what was it, the lonely cage persona?
Yeah.
That one I've got to maybe take a closer
isolated
look at.
Zoomer.
Yeah, there you go. But maybe those are the people that haven't yet fully been back very often. But I can see it throughout the office. And we've had those moments as I make my way around. Just yesterday, we had about 20 of our people on staff in the office, and it was great. There was great energy. And you saw consistently around the space just those moments of reconnecting with people they haven't seen in a while. And it was wonderful. Sarah, I'll turn it over to you and the team at Lighthouse. I'd love for you to kind of talk about what those personas and needs are, how that plays out in the real world, in your office space. Have you seen that same dynamic, and how do you see it going forward?
Absolutely. Thanks, Randy. I would agree with your comments that at Lighthouse, I think I've seen all of those personas that Beth has described. I think I was kind of mentally putting faces with those personas as you were going through that. Absolutely. It's been interesting to see how it has played out at Lighthouse. I think it's definitely changed, obviously, everyone's scope of what makes sense for them. A lot of our employees are really taking some time to do some of that work and really think through what space is best for this activity, or how could this space better support this activity, and starting to carve those pieces out. At Lighthouse, we developed a committee or a focus group of about 20 employees. We're calling it the Path Forward. It's focused on post-COVID strategies. So we kind of took a similar approach. Melissa mentioned this a little bit, is all these regulations have been changing. We're trying to figure out what makes sense right now. There's so much that's gone on. And we have a lot of employees that we recognize still need to transition back to a return to office. We were just even joking about the pandemic pets we have at Lighthouse, all of the puppies that have started showing up on Zoom and Teams. And I know it sounds a little bit silly, but even thinking through, changing your patterns, or what might that look like if you return to office, or new babies, or just very different things that we weren't used to working through before. So we're taking the opportunity to spend really the next 6 months with the Path Forward Committee. It's cross-functional. We have everyone from a receptionist to business leaders to account managers, sales, to really bring forward what it means to their department and what it means to their role within the organization, and hopefully try to start creating some commonalities that we can build strategy towards, and then working towards where are there differences based on the segment or the market or the type of business, but how do we create those equitable choices as that controlled feeling. I think the beginning was really talking a lot about what do we even mean by flexibility or by remote work or by hybrid work. We all are using those terms, but they mean very different things to everyone on the committee. That just starting to understand, what does that mean to them? Does it mean having a set schedule where you have a couple remote days and then a couple in office days? And it really did keep going back to that primary concept of owning your own day, being trusted to make the right decisions based on what activities you have planned for the day, and feeling this real sense of empowerment if we have that setting. I think the next piece is then, how do you deliver to your clients on with that flexibility? How does that make sense? How can we deliver our service levels and feel really great about being the trusted consultants that we need to be in each market segment while meeting those goals and best work habits of our team? But it's been really interesting what the committee has developed in terms of innovating their own departments. Let's talk about personal lines by appointment. Let's talk about giving new technology solutions. We're doing Medicare consulting via Teams. Never thought that would happen. Not just because you just make assumptions that we based on how we were working before, and we're really kind of exploring those within the confines of what works best for our teams, and then how we can apply that to make sure it works best for our clients.
No, that's great. And I think, as I said before, seeing those personas throughout the organization has been interesting to see. I hadn't put it in the same phraseology that Beth had, but you can see it as you went through it, and it's interesting to hear your experience there at Lighthouse. The other piece, and that I think back in the Great Recession, I remember the Kellogg Foundation at Battle Creek did some research around getting people back into the workforce. And that was a recession that was especially hard on manufacturing. And some of the analysis the foundation came back with was that people over time, after extended stays away from the facility, had sort of lost some of their physical fitness and their ability to even do the work for 8 consecutive hours. And we see a little bit of that here, where the work style, the work pattern changed when people work from home. They're working on their couch, they might have been sitting up in their bed, and they get to the office now, we're all sitting in great office furniture, but we don't have those soft landing places around our space anyway. And so people, I think, are looking for that kind of dynamic, which has been interesting. Josh, we touched on earlier, you fast growing company there at Michigan Software Labs, you're really building something special. And in the midst of your growth, you and your partner go out to decide to open up a new office building, which is, I can't wait to see it later on tonight, but pretty exciting space, and got to be different opening up a new space in the midst of all of this. So first of all, how's it going, and how are the people reacting to the new space?
Yeah, thanks, Randy, and thanks for having me here. It was really interesting. So we actually had started talking about our new office space pre-COVID, and had gotten a good way down the path at that point. And then I still remember that video that I recorded for our team end of March of like, we're gonna start working from home for the next couple of weeks. How quickly can this pass? I mean, I'm sure it won't go more than a couple of months. And so that set the plans for the office on hold. But we recognized over the coming months, or the following months after we kind of moved to that remote work, just how important the relationships and the interactions of our team were to the work that we were doing. Michigan Labs, similar to a lot of the stuff that it sounds like Progressive is, highly creative, highly collaborative. And we feel that we're serving our clients best when we have those opportunities to be collaborative and creative. And being together at times helps make that a little bit easier. And so after a couple months of pandemic, we said, you know what, we're still going to move forward. So we broke ground on the new office middle of last year. And then we've been in here for a whole whopping 3 weeks that we've kind of had the office open all together. And it's been really cool kind of seeing that time together. We made some tweaks of things that we've learned over the pandemic as we started to see some of those soft landing spaces, and recognizing that phone booths and individual meeting spaces and conference rooms were going to be even more important than they were before. As a consultancy, we work with clients all across the country. So we were already on a lot of Zoom and phone calls, but we recognized, especially a single person would be doing more and more of that kind of post-pandemic too. And so we designed the office to support some of those things. We've created a lot of opportunities for collaborative space in there as well. Our whole first floor is kind of a cafe feeling, and so you can interact and go grab some coffee and have some of those serendipitous conversations and overhear what's happening. but with plenty of room to kind of social distance and spread out too. And so we had the opportunity to shift designs and react and learn a little bit over the time. But yeah, so beginning of June, we started encouraging our team to come back. We're taking the transition somewhat slowly, and we're listening to a lot of feedback, but we've said, we want you to start building that muscle. I love that perspective that we talked about. We want you to start building that muscle of being back in the office. Do it at your own pace. We don't necessarily know what that looks like individually, but for at least the next month and a half, we want you to start kind of thinking about it from your own perspective. Pick your schedule, come back in, start to flex that muscle and build it back up of being in the office. And so far, it's been amazing to see the reaction that we've had from our team. The day that we opened and encouraged people to start coming back, I think we had 90% of the team come in, at least for a portion of that day, just because they wanted to see a new office is exciting enough. So that was a nice little draw that we benefited from. But they wanted to see what was going on, and they got to see their coworkers and see the people that they'd missed and have lunch together and interact. And so it's been really cool seeing that over the past week and a half, really is where we've started that transition period of seeing people start to interact, seeing those relationships kind of pick back up where they left off, and remembering what it's like to be in person in a meeting with somebody and figure out where you have to look. And if you're looking in their eyes, and how you interact with paper that's sitting in front of you instead of a Zoom screen that has your notes, and all those little things that it's been a year and a half of this. We've forgotten some of those things. So we're excited to see the team build up that muscle over the transition period. But then we're thinking probably middle of the summer is what we're hoping, after we get some more feedback on timing. But we're hoping that middle of the summer, we start getting into kind of a company schedule where we're going to be spending 3 days as a whole company in the office. So Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and we'll be in person first during those days. And then Wednesday, Fridays, we're thinking is going to be remote first. So the office will still be open. You're welcome to come in and use it, but we'll be more defaulting to a remote first interactions where even if I'm on a Zoom call with other people on our team in the office, we'll be looking more for individual interactions. So I'll take that call from my office. They may take it from a phone booth, just so that the entire team who does choose to work remotely on those days has the opportunity to be super flexible and not feel left out, even for those that do choose to be in the team, and kind of set up some of those interactions. And so we're really excited about what that schedule looks like. Pre-pandemic, we had Wednesday work from home days. And so we had one day kind of pre-pandemic where everybody had the choice to work remotely on those days. And about 75% of our team did with pretty regular basis. And so one of the learnings that we had from COVID was if one worked, two will be even better. So that's kind of what we're going forward with.
Well, I like that approach, Josh. And actually, we've borrowed from that idea based on our earlier conversation around having fixed days where the strong bias is to be in the office, because the magic of working from the office comes from everybody being together, not just a random subset of our team. So we're following your lead there too. I wonder, maybe for everybody on the call, we have a question from the audience that talks about, their struggle to understand, the effectiveness and productivity of people working from home versus working in the office, where they feel they have better measurement tools in place in the office versus at home. And Brad, maybe I'll start with you. One of your lines was, with this flexibility comes responsibility and accountability. How have you gone about measuring the productivity of your team, whether they're in the office or at home? And I'll ask the others to chime in on this as well.
Yeah, no, sure, Randy. Great question. What I would share is I can appreciate the discomfort. Maybe that'd be the way I would put it. When we went from mostly everybody here to nobody here, those were probably my most sleepless nights, when I would come in here at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday and look at 190 empty desks. Boy, I sure hope they're doing their work. But I got to tell you, I was incredibly impressed. I think the employees were as concerned about, boy, if I'm out of sight, I better make sure I'm getting my work done and I'm demonstrating it. And of course, they were as interested in the success of the firm and as I was. And I would say they more than compensated for the lack of being together. The other thing I would share is that our work is really integrated. And I know we often have a lot of structure to project execution and plans, and there's a series of deadlines along the path, and so it's pretty hard to hide. Not that anybody would do that, but if somebody isn't lifting their share, they're going to show up pretty quickly. So I would say within a pretty short period of time, I came to recognize. We trust is a foundation of our organization. The Stephen Covey Speed of Trust is required reading for every employee when they come in the door. But it was a test, right? It was a test of management and leadership to say, boy, okay, out of sight, out of mind. And but within a short period of time, I've come to accept and evolve that people are going to do the right thing. And it's sort of this 80-20, as we even talk about what does return to office mean, this idea of with flexibility comes accountability. I think what I've discussed with our team is for 80% of my staff, it's a non-issue. They're going to figure it out. They're going to do what it takes, and they're going to do the right thing. I think there's going to be some situations, and this is where we talk about managing remote work and some of the competency development, where perhaps next January, somebody's going to say, hey, what's the problem? My working from Myrtle Beach and not being in the office is working just fine for me. And we may need to, at that point, do some course correction, but for the most part, I know people are going to do the right thing. How do you equip your managers and leaderships to have, one of the next required readings that's probably going to show up on people's list is a book that we read as part of this training called Radical Candor. Some folks may already be familiar with it, but it's, in my mind, it sort of takes some of the West Michigan niceness and really, one thing I would say we learned through this process is one thing that doesn't age well is problems. And there's a tendency when you're working remote to want to wait to have difficult conversations till we're back together in person. But the problem is that might not be later today or tomorrow. It could be further down the path. And so equipping our managers to both recognize and then be able to sort of intercept if necessary quickly and do it in an effective way is part of the way that we've at least managed it today.
I kind of share in that too. Very similar. Radical Candor is on our reading list as well. And what we've found, and I think one of the culture shifts that we've seen over the past year and a half too, is there's a lot more transparency and candor needed amongst our teams. And so we've really encouraged the teams, not even with their lead or their manager, but really just their coworkers and their peers to share, hey, this is what's going on in my life right now. I'm thinking about going to Myrtle Beach for 2 days. Is that going to work out with project schedules? Because those are the types of things that we want to interact, right? We have that flexibility. We don't want to lose those things, but there has to be a little bit of give and take on the teams. And so we've encouraged our teams to share very openly. This is what's going on. I've got a kid that's sick. Today's going to be tough for me to get stuff done, or I have a schedule. And it's that transparency and candor that works out really well. But then the willingness of the team to maybe call out on the other side and say, actually, that week that you're thinking of being gone and doing some remote work, that's not going to be great for us either on a project schedule, or maybe it's a little bit too much. And just having those open conversations, I think really sets the tone, because my flexibility looks very different than my coworkers' flexibility. And we need to balance that out. And the only way that that can happen is through those conversations and really being open, because if there are those problems that sit, they will fester and then they blow up. And I think we try to avoid those with conversation.
No, Josh, that's terrific. And I think it goes back to Brad's earlier remarks about we before me and making sure everybody understands the broader and doesn't lose sight of the broader goal. Beth, you were going to add?
Yeah, I'd like to add on to both. I agree with both of what Brad and Josh said. And, for us, I think I'd say we've amped up certain behaviors and certain expectations during these last 16 months, and we'll continue them going forward in the hybrid. So one is this absolute transparency and trust. But then secondly, we've asked leaders to pull their teams together much more often, because we believe that remote work and hybrid work calls for more communication and more touch points. So whether it's a one-on-one meeting between myself and someone who reports to me, or some of the subsets and some of the teams, much more communication and then open dialogue about what they're getting done. At the same time, we were changing the vernacular and the expectations such that good performance isn't about how hard you're working and the activity level, it's about the end result. So we've taken that concept of holding people accountable to the end results and the milestones and the metrics, along the way, and the toll gates. And we've married that with moving from what we had for a number of years, I think most people did, which were annual performance reviews. We now have quarterly impact coaching sessions. So it's a true two-way dialogue on a quarterly basis about where you stand relative to the results that you're held accountable for. But then there's also trying to change the tenor of those conversations. There's a bit of give and take. So my direct reports are able to tell me what I could be doing better to help them hit those results, or what I'm doing great, but I don't do enough of. So there's that honest, transparent sharing, because we're all judged for the end results.
Sarah, how about you? With Lighthouse, you've got clear metrics that have to be achieved in managing that work from home dynamic. How have you kept tabs on productivity and outcomes throughout?
I think that I would agree again with Josh and Brad and Beth around the comments that have already been said, but really doubling down on the communication aspect. It's unbelievable how the small group huddles have really taken off, and making sure that everyone has some team that they're connecting into regularly, whether it's a 15-minute morning huddle, really seemed to be a very important execution part of our strategy. Our management team is definitely engaging in more of the one-on-one meetings, making sure that there is more of that real-time communication. I think we're also being really open to change. What we thought helped manage productivity 6 months ago really looks a lot different. A great example is when we first went remote, part of our virtual environment was every meeting we need to have videos on, let's engage, let's look at each other and, you know, make sure that you're giving body language. Now we're seeing all the studies of Zoom fatigue and just what does that do? And I feel it personally, you know, at the end of the day. So being open to change through what we originally thought was helping guide productivity has been really kind of important to us as well. And then looking for ways on an organizational level that we can provide more opportunities for employee engagement or understanding alignment and direction, where we might not be having as much of those, you know, minute meetings or seeing someone at the coffee station or seeing someone around those soft settings of the office. So Lighthouse instituted a quarterly cadence similar to Beth shared, with all employee town hall meeting, sharing some department objectives, successes, really trying to focus on employee recognition. I think that's a piece that was hard to create virtually outside of the individual team basis, is how do we recognize some of the successes that we used to do either visually somewhere in the office or at a little bit more of an easier way to display. So trying to make sure that we're putting that first and foremost to keep our employees engaged, as well as a part of understanding the strategy, how they're connecting to it and how we're all a part of it to move forward.
Yeah, whether I guess in person or virtual communication is paramount, and more is always better. Just maybe a quick rapid fire question. What percentage, and Jill, maybe we can ask the broader audience this as well, what percentage of your office employees are currently coming in on a regular basis? So Beth, what percentage would you say is still the case?
I'd say in Grand Rapids, we're at 2/3, 66, 70.
Okay, thank you. Josh?
Probably similar kind of to that. We're in that transition phase, so we're still figuring out what that looks like of regular office. But yeah, it's probably 2/3, 3/4.
And if the audience could complete the poll while we ask the panelists, Brad, where are you guys at?
We're not that far along yet, Randy. We really haven't invited people back. I shared we're doing a reset right now, so we're probably under 50%. Headed north, though. I expect after the 5th of July.
Okay, thank you. And Sarah?
We're a little bit closer to where Brad is at. We just invited people back June 2nd as optional. So we're starting to see, it's been very interesting the last week and a half, who comes in and what that looks like. I'd say we're probably maybe 25 to 35% of individuals that have come back for at least a day or two.
Okay, and then maybe one, I'm sorry.
Brad, I was just going to, or Randy, I was just going to say, if I may, you know, we started with the words invite, then encourage, and now expect from a office's primary perspective. There's still choice and control. But today is the first day we go to expect. And so yesterday was still at encourage, and I had trouble. I came in later in the morning and I had trouble finding parking. So we might be closer to 90 today.
Yeah.
So.
All right, perfect. And then there's a question in the Q&A tab at their tool at the bottom, and if others have them, please feel free to use that tool. But it really raises an interesting question. We've been in this sort of jobs war, this talent war for many years now, and as the global demographics start to slow down and shrink a little bit with baby boomers retiring in mass all around the world, it's going to get even more intense. And so the sort of the power dynamic, if you will, between companies and talent is shifting a little bit, and working from home has given people flexibility that they appreciate and they enjoy. And we're seeing examples, Josh and I have had this conversation on the tech side, but we're seeing examples of major companies sort of coming into markets like ours and cherry picking engineering talent, tech talent, you name it. And so being able to provide a work from home flexibility is paramount to retaining that existing talent. One of the questions then was, how do you convince sort of, let's say, middle managers who might have more of an old school way of thinking, if you're not in the office, you must not be working. How do you get sort of that old guard management style to understand the need for flexibility is paramount to attract and retain talent today? And Josh, I'll start with you.
So like you mentioned, Randy, I mean, tech is kind of a little bit freer in this one. So this isn't something that we've really struggled with internally quite as much. Michigan Labs was really founded on a lot of that flexibility at the beginning. And so we attracted people that saw the need for relationship balanced with schedule flexibility. That's kind of been the culture that we've attracted. One of the things that I have heard and that I've seen though, is kind of pushing it back almost on that person and saying, like, what parts of the flexibility of your job or of the pandemic have you appreciated over a little bit? And almost trying to get that empathy going with that person, and whether that's helping them maybe think about what that was when they were in a different stage of life and what the flexibility that they would have enjoyed then, or the empathy of where they're at right now. Saying, like, your flexibility is different than my flexibility, and the expectations are different and all of those things, but really trying to push into empathy is one of the things that I've seen work well, kind of to start those conversations at least, and kind of work through some of them.
Beth, how about a steel case? I mean, your talent is in demand around the world and has options. How have you balanced, or how have you worked with those managers who are maybe a little bit more old school and want people in all the time?
I think for us, it starts with educating them to what the data shows and what our research shows. So, if you happen to be in our HR organization or in a research organization, you've got those statistics at the ready, and you understand that flexibility is one of the most important things in this talent war, that all generations, honestly, because of what we've been through, it's important to all generations. Other things are sense of purpose and a sense of belonging at the company. So in order to create those and have all of your management team really understand and buy in, you've got to educate them, you've got to show the data. That's the first step we take. But then secondly, the higher ups, because if this is a middle management problem, the higher ups have to emulate that flexibility themselves and be very transparent about it. And I would use as an example, several years ago when we remodeled our campus in Grand Rapids, we created work cafes, because we had these gorgeous cafeterias that were used for 45 minutes a day, and then they were dark and they were just empty space. So I think similar to what Josh said, we created this concept of a work cafe where you have really great food, but you also have really great spaces, and they're very residential, but they also allow you to have a video call with somebody in Asia. So if you're working at 6 o'clock at night, the Asian team's coming in at 7 in the morning for them, you can connect through video. And what we found when we rolled out these great spaces that were very flexible and they were hard working spaces because you could do so much in them. What we found is that the middle level, some middle managers were critiquing their employees if they saw them work down there because they weren't at their desk where they could actually see them. So we launched a communication campaign through our intranet to tell middle level managers that that was the wrong behavior. But then the executive team started working down in that work cafe. So as I would prep for a Steelcase board meeting, I'd bring my stack of materials then, because we printed it out, and still do. I'd post up in one of those sessions all day long and just work there. And slowly middle level managers understood when they saw us emulate the behavior. So education and leaders emulating.
Oh, that's terrific. Maybe one last rapid fire question as we wrap up our program here today. If you had one bit of advice, if you could take all of the content we've had over the last hour or so, boil it down to one thing you would advise all of the attendees on the call today, what would that be? And Sarah, I see you just went on mute, so I'm going to call on you first.
On the lucky first. No, that's wonderful. Perfect. Be happy to answer that. Where my mind went to when you pose that question is just really focusing on honoring your core values, really looking at what made you successful. Why did employees want to work for your organization in the first place? Why do clients want to do business? How do you interact with your community? What lens and prism did you put those decisions through? How do you try to eliminate the noise a little bit of what everyone else is doing? Because everyone's uncle, brother, cousin, anyone in the industry, everyone vendor is going to be doing a different thing and have a different strategy. So really honoring your core values, and through that making decisions that speak to who you are as an organization and how you want to support your employees, clients, and the community, and really just being true to that while we all try to work through this together.
Perfect. Beth?
I would say be very intentional with your strategies to invite and expect people to come back primarily. So talk to the fact that there were a broad range of experiences throughout the last 16 months, and some people are truly forever changed. And there are people who lost family members. There are employees who have autoimmune issues and pre-existing conditions, and they are scared. They no longer will be okay with the person sitting next to them coughing, even if it's just flu season. They're forever changed. So be intentional about speaking to your entire employee base about understanding through empathy exactly where people are, and then creating a workplace strategy that will allow that flexibility to each person. So for instance, if I'm one that is scared, create for me the environment where I can isolate myself and I can be closed off when I feel that I need to be. And if I'm the persona that just can't wait to get back and I really need open, collaborative, innovative, flexible environments, talk to me and tell me that you're creating that for me, and really scratch the itch of everybody and realize that there is a talent war, there is a shortage, and in order to keep the best people, you're going to have to provide a more inclusive environment for everybody.
And I would piggyback on both of those. Sorry to jump in, Randy, but I think the clearest or the most successful way to really help employees be engaged in that is to communicate. So wholeheartedly agree with Sarah, be grounded in your why and your values, but then help your employees understand that that's why you're making the decisions that you're making. And this is our strategy because this is who we are and this is how we succeed. And then like Brad mentioned, they'll want to participate in that success, and they'll be engaged in that success and be excited to see how they can contribute to the success of the organization. But if they don't understand why and they think it's just arbitrary decisions, it's going to be a lot harder for them to really want to understand how that benefits their job if they've demonstrated they can do it just fine in a different way over the last 15 months.
Thanks, Melissa. Terrific. Brad, you want to follow that?
Yep, I was, and probably it falls somewhere in between Melissa and Beth, and this idea of clarity of message matters. Words matter. Recognize that there are people across the spectrum of I can't wait to get back, or I'm a manager and I'm old school and I expect to see my people, to the other end of the extreme where people are trying to protect this new freedom and flexibility. And what I found is even in my own management team, people will filter what they hear. We were using the same words, but they were filtering it from their perspective. And so clarity really matters. I had to actually pull some people aside and help them understand some of the language, that the people to protect freedom were using was freaking out those that wanted people to, back in the office. And so the choice of words and clarity of message is really, really important. And don't assume because you said something, they heard you. They heard it through their lens. So
Sure. Thank you. Josh, you're batting cleanup today. Can you build on that?
Yeah, I'll actually stay on the same theme. So we talked a lot about being clear and helping communicate out from us to our teams. I think the flip side then is we just have to listen. And I don't think we can listen enough to our teams throughout this whole thing. What their preferences are, what their level of safety consciousness is, what's going on in their lives. And so ask a lot of questions and just listen to the answers, because I may invent a story of why I think you're acting a certain way or what I think is right for the company. But we have people that are living out the culture and the team. And I want to hear from them just as much as I want to hear from me and from the rest of our leadership team, because they're the people that are going to make this a success. And so let's ask questions and just listen, and use that as a way to build our strategy going forward while being clear about where we're headed, but listening through the whole time of it.
Terrific. Well, on behalf, we can't do a standing ovation over Zoom, so bear with me, panel, but truly thanks for all of your insights and observations. I know it's helped inform a number of people across West Michigan, so thanks for giving up your time here today. I would just close with a couple of reminders. If you have an interest in sort of diversifying your supply chain, diversifying your spend, be sure to check out our new website and explore that diverse business directory that we have there. We provided that earlier in the chat, and I'm sure we can send a follow-up email as well. It was requested, Beth, that we share the Steelcase research, and I know we can get that out to the audience. And then finally, I think Brad's point about we before me really resonated. And as I think about that, it's not only internal to our offices, but it's across the region and across the community. And as we come back together in our offices, I guess I would ask everybody, investors of here at Right Place and beyond, find ways to schedule time for we, from a community's we perspective. We need to come back together. We need to get working more collaboratively around big, bold opportunities for the region. And at the Right Place, we're a we organization internally and externally. And for us to gather beginning this fall and start moving some of these things from virtual to in-person attendance is critical for our work. It's critical for our region. And whether it's with us or the Right Place or any other nonprofit around the community, I think it's important for us to come back together. And I would encourage you to start finding time for those endeavors again in person. I think it'll make a big, big difference, and it'll help us sort of pass by some of our competitors as we come out of this pandemic. So with that, again, thank you to our panelists, and thank you to all of you as investors in the Right Place. Greatly appreciate your support and look forward to working with you going forward. Take care.